I never wanted the house. Let me start with that. It wasn't a fixer-upper. It wasn't charming or historic. It was the kind of place you don't look directly at when you drive by. The kind of house that feels like it's already looking at you. But when Aunt Margaret died and left it to me in her will, I didn't have the luxury to be picky. Rent was killing me in the city, and the house was paid off. Cold Spring was only 2 hours up the Hudson. I figured I'd stay for a year, save up and move on. I didn't expect to last a month. It started with the floorboards. At first, just subtle creaks at night. Normal stuff, old house settling, right? But then it got specific. It was always the same pattern. 2 slow creaks down the hallway, a pause, then 3 quicker ones toward my bedroom door. Always around 2:45 in the morning. I thought it was the house adjusting to temperature shifts. I even Googled it. Something about wood expansion. Made sense until the knocking started. The first time it came from beneath my bed, just a single knock, loud enough to make me sit up straight. I leaned over, heart pounding, and peered underneath. Empty, dust, a sock I'd lost weeks ago. Then the second knock, this time against the headboard, right behind my skull. I whipped around. Nothing there. I slept in the living room that night. I found my first journal entry about it 2 days later. I must have written it in half sleep. The handwriting was mine, but uneven, like my hand had trembled. February 19, 2:47 a.m. Heard it again. Floorboards and then the knock. Just one, like it's waiting for something. The word waiting was underlined 4 times. That was the night I started recording audio while I slept. I downloaded a cheap sleep tracking app that picked up noise spikes. I didn't expect anything useful, maybe the heating system or raccoons in the attic. But the next morning I had 12 separate recordings labelled noise detected. Most were static and small thumps, except one. At exactly 2:46 a.m, there was a whisper. A whisper so faint, I had to crank the volume to dangerous levels to hear it. And even then, I wasn't sure what it said. It wasn't English, but it sounded like language. I sent the clip to my friend Miriam, who studied linguistics at Columbia. She listened to it twice and called me immediately. "Where did you record this?" she asked, voice tight. "In my bedroom. This sounds like Proto-Celtic, or maybe pre-Indo-European. But it's warped, reversed maybe." "Is it human?" I asked. She didn't answer at first. Finally, "It used to be." I tried to laugh it off. Old house, weird noises, audio pareidolia. But the knock came again that night, and this time it wasn't from the floor. It came from inside the wall. The house was built in 1887. The structure was mostly wood, with a stone foundation and thin plaster walls. When I moved in, I did a full sweep of the house. I found no crawl spaces, no false panels, just outdated electrical wiring and some mildew. But something about the knock felt hollow, like it came from a void just inches beyond the plaster. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. Then I whispered, "Hello?" and something whispered back. I didn't tell anyone else. Miriam had already seemed unnerved, and I didn't want to scare my mom or my girlfriend, Rena. She hated the idea of me moving into an inherited shack, as she called it, even before things got weird. But things did get weird. Like the time I came home to find my bedroom door locked from the inside. Or when I woke up to find all the drawers in the kitchen pulled open. Or the time I heard something pacing in the attic, even though there was no access point and no sign of any entry. I started sleeping with the lights on. I bought a carbon monoxide detector. I checked for mold. I convinced myself I was imagining it, that I was lonely. But then the smell came. It started in the hallway, a coppery, wet smell, like rusted metal soaked in rainwater. I scrubbed every surface. Nothing helped. The smell grew stronger at night, especially near the bedroom door. One night, I followed it. I walked barefoot into the hallway at 2:43 a.m, phone flashlight in hand. The air felt denser, almost humid. My ears rang with pressure. Then I noticed something strange. The floorboard near the closet door, the one that always creaked, was missing its nail, like it had been pried up. I crouched and pulled gently. It came loose with almost no resistance. Beneath the floor was a shallow hollow, not deep enough for storage, just an empty pocket between boards. Inside it, a rolled-up sheet of parchment. Yes, parchment, not paper. It was cracked, yellowed, old enough to flake at the edges. On it was writing. Not in ink, but in something darker, something that had congealed. The letters weren't English. They looked hand-carved, angular, alien. But one symbol repeated 4 times, a perfect spiral with a vertical line through the center. My stomach turned. It was the same symbol carved into the stone above the fireplace, a decorative detail I'd never questioned before. Until now. I showed it to Miriam the next day. Her face went pale. "That's not proto-anything," she said. "It looks ritualistic, like what you see in old burial sites, Neolithic stuff. But that's impossible. You said your house was built in the 1800s. I nodded. "What if the house was built on something older?" I asked. She didn't laugh. That night I heard breathing under the floor. Not wind, not pipes. Breathing, measured, rhythmic, faint, but undeniable. I lay in bed for hours, eyes wide open, lights on, gripping a hammer like it could protect me. Then, just before dawn, a single voice whispered from under the floor, "Give it back." I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, heart hammering in my chest, gripping the hammer like a lifeline, trying to rationalize what I'd heard. Give it back. The whisper hadn't been in my head. I heard it, out loud, clear, inches from my bed, muffled by wood. It had a dry, strained quality, like lungs pushing air through old cloth. By sunrise, I had convinced myself it was sleep paralysis. I was exhausted, dehydrated. Maybe I dreamed it. I told myself that until I saw what was waiting for me in the hallway. The rolled-up parchment was back, laid out neatly on the floorboards, cleaned, smoothed out. The writing, once faded and cracked, now vivid, dark red. It wasn't dust or pigment. It was wet. I didn't touch it. Miriam came back that afternoon, this time with a voice recorder and 2 books on early European burial rituals. She didn't even try to play skeptic anymore. Something about the parchment or the way I looked, I hadn't slept more than an hour in 3 days, had finally convinced her. I showed her the floorboard compartment. It was still there, shallow and dusty, but the parchment was gone. "I swear to God it was here," I said, my hands shaking. "I believe you." She crouched down and pulled out a small blacklight from her bag, waved it across the wood. There were streaks, thin lines, dried liquid, not visible to the naked eye. "It's blood," she muttered. "At least was." That evening, we went through the house from top to bottom. Miriam mapped out the structure with a floor plan app. We measured strange angles, took temperature readings. Every single room was consistent, except one. The back guest room, the one I never used. The temperature dropped by 7 degrees near the closet. The floorboards echoed oddly when tapped. Miriam pointed to a section near the wall. "Something's under here." I shook my head. "There's no crawl space. I checked when I moved in." "Not a crawl space," she said. "A cavity." We pried up the boards. Beneath the wooden slats was an old hatch. Iron, rusted, bolted shut. It wasn't part of the original floor construction. It was buried beneath it, hidden. Miriam looked at me. "You knew this was here?" "No." But I stopped, because now that I was looking at it, I did remember something. A nightmare from my first week in the house. A dream where I stood in the guest room, staring down at an iron hatch, hearing something breathe beneath it. "I think I dreamed about this," I whispered. "That's not possible," she said. But it was. We didn't open it. Not that night. We couldn't get the bolts loose anyway. They were rusted shut. Miriam insisted we needed better tools, maybe an angle grinder or at least industrial WD-40. We made a pact. We'd come back the next day with gear and gloves and open it in daylight. Miriam offered to stay the night, but I said no. I don't know why. Maybe pride. Maybe fear that she'd see what the house did after dark. I wish I'd let her stay. That night, the noises started earlier. No 2:45 delay this time. At 12:03 a.m., the house shuddered. That's the only word I can use, like something inside it had stretched. The floorboards groaned. The windows trembled. I stood in the hallway, flashlight shaking, listening. Then the whisper came again. "You brought her here. Not from under the bed, not from the walls, from every direction at once." I stumbled back into my room and locked the door. I dragged a dresser in front of it. I huddled in the corner like a kid, whispering to myself, then the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Bare feet across the wooden floor outside my door. And breathing, but not one set of lungs, 2. At 3:18 a.m. my phone vibrated. A message from Miriam. I woke up and my nose was bleeding. I heard something in my walls. Then another. I heard my own voice call my name from the kitchen. Then nothing. I tried calling. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I wanted to drive to her place. Get out. do something. But when I opened my bedroom door, the hallway was gone. I don't mean it looked different. I mean it was gone. Just wall. Seamless wood paneling, no door frame. Like the house had redesigned itself. I didn't sleep. By sunrise, everything was back to normal. The hallway was there. The closet was untouched. The hatch still bolted. I rushed to Miriam's apartment. She didn't answer. I had the super let me in. He said she hadn't left all morning. He was right. Her phone was on the table, her wallet by the door, but no sign of her. No blood, no note. Just a symbol, drawn in what looked like charcoal, on the kitchen wall. A spiral with a line through it. The police weren't helpful. They logged a missing persons report. Asked me if she had a history of running off. I said no. She was meticulous. She didn't just leave her phone. They told me not to leave town. I went home. The hatch waited. The silence was different now. Not peaceful, not neutral. It was expectant, like the house knew something had changed. Something was gone. Miriam. I waited a day, then another. I left voicemails, drove past her apartment a dozen times. I even knocked on her parents' door miles away and saw the fear in their eyes when they realized she really was missing. By the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. The house wanted me to open the hatch. Every creak of the floor, every gust of wind behind the walls seemed to pull toward that room, that sealed pit. So I gave in. I bought the tools. Gloves, bolt cutters, an angle grinder, crowbar, a flashlight with backup batteries, a breathing mask, a GoPro strapped to my chest. Whatever was down there, I'd document it. I'd face it. Because it had taken her. And I wasn't going to let it win. The grinding of rusted bolts echoed through the empty house like screams. The scent that rushed out when I pried the hatch open was unexplainable. Not rot exactly, but oldness, like a room sealed before birth. Beneath the hatch, a ladder. Iron rungs set into stone. Descending straight down into darkness. The stonework was ancient, mismatched, blackened by time. I shined my light down the hole and saw nothing but black. The air shimmered like heat waves, but it was cold. I climbed down. It wasn't a cellar, it was a corridor, low, tight and winding, carved through the earth like a vein with timber braces and crumbling mortar. I couldn't tell how far it went, but my flashlight barely touched the walls ahead. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. No echo, no breathing. Just my heartbeat in my ears and the crunch of grit beneath my boots. Then, footprints, not mine, bare feet. Deep prints in the dust leading further into the dark. Then the smell returned, thick, clinging, wet, like hair left in a drain too long. Then I heard her. Help me. Faint, distant, but real. I ran toward the voice, following the twisting corridor until the walls opened into a chamber. A round room, maybe 20 feet across, ceiling low and domed, stones slick with moisture. In the center, a pit, black, unlit, a perfect circle. Etched into the walls were carvings, not words, faces. Hundreds of faces, screaming, grimacing, some expressionless, all carved with agonizing detail, some chipped away, some fresh. The pit called to me. Not literally, just with silence. It was the quietest thing I've ever encountered, like sound itself refused to go near it. I stepped closer. Don't look in. A voice, soft, right behind me. I spun. Miriam stood at the corridor entrance, barefoot, soaked, eyes bloodshot. Miriam? But she didn't speak again. She pointed to the pit, then slowly shook her head as if warning me. I ran to her. She backed away fast. Then she was gone. Not fled. Not turned. Just gone. Like someone had erased her from the space. I looked around, screaming her name. The silence rushed in, filling my mouth, pressing against my ears. I dropped to my knees. The pit remained. Waiting. I shouldn't have looked, I know that now. But in that moment I felt it pull. Not physically, but emotionally. Like it knew me. Like it held answers, like it held her. I shined my flashlight down the pit. Nothing. I dropped a pebble. No sound. Then I lowered the GoPro. I tied it to a rope and fed it down slowly, foot by foot. 40 feet. 50. Still nothing. Then the rope jerked. I yanked it back up. The camera was gone. The rope had been cleanly sliced. I ran. I didn't even bother sealing the hatch behind me. I climbed out, heart slamming, and drove to the edge of town. I sat in my car for hours. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I returned, the hatch was sealed, completely, as if it had never been opened. New floorboards, fresh paint. No ladder, no corridor, no pit. I tried to show people, the GoPro's backup footage, but the file was gone, corrupted, just static. The police didn't care anymore. They listed Miriam as voluntary missing. The house was quiet again, but sometimes late at night I hear breathing beneath the floorboards, and now the whisper says something new. You looked, she saw, now it waits. When I first heard about the Glenwood disappearance, I was in college, working part-time at the county archives. I came across a misfiled box marked Unresolved Audio, buried under a stack of tax records from 1996. Inside were 3 cassette tapes, unlabeled except for a faded Sharpie scrawl. Ren 12A, do not duplicate. I didn't recognize the address at the time. But after listening to just 20 seconds of the first tape, I copied down everything and drove straight there. The house was still standing, still boarded up, still hiding something. 12 Wren Road was a modest single-story brick home tucked behind a row of overgrown birches just a few blocks outside Glenwood's main street. Nothing about it seemed special from the road. Paint flaking, a sagging porch, weeds crowding the path. But neighbours gave it a wide berth. I spoke to 2 women across the street, one in her 60s, the other maybe 40. Used to be the Benson place, the older woman said, arms crossed. That's where the boy went missing. The boy? I asked, her face soured. Lars Benson, 17, gone in 2003. Police never found him, but folks heard things. Like what? The younger one spoke up. Voices, at night, sometimes his voice. They wouldn't say more, but I already knew the tapes were real. The first cassette, marked only with a scratch on the spine, began mid-recording. You hear a door slam, distant, then footsteps, breathing, then Lars's voice. Day 3. I don't know who I'm recording this for. Myself? The cops? It's hard to tell what time it is anymore. The power's been cutting in and out. I think it's the basement. The breaker flips on its own. I've been hearing stuff, like whispers. Last night it said my name. I thought it was the pipes, but it said my name. I'm going back down there. I have to see what's causing it. Then static, and the faint sound of someone descending creaky stairs. I listened to that tape 3 times before realizing something chilling. It wasn't recorded all at once. There were jumps in ambient sound, like pieces had been spliced together or the recorder had been turned off and on repeatedly. What was he hiding between recordings, or what did he not want to be caught on tape? That same day, I went to the county library to pull property records for the house. It had been purchased in 1996 by Gary Benson, Lars's father. Widowed. He worked maintenance at a nearby grain mill. Lars was his only son. Gary died in 2004, 6 months after Lars disappeared. Cause of death, fall down the basement stairs. No one had entered the house since. I found a police report, mostly redacted, but in one section a responding officer wrote, "Basement door was sealed from the inside. No signs of forced entry. Father's body found at base of stairs, neck broken. Candles arranged around the perimeter. Recorder found on landing. Tape was blank, only static." I knew I had to get into that house, and I knew I wouldn't go alone. My friend Morgan was the type to chase ghost stories, the kind who brought EMF detectors to abandoned malls and swore she once saw a woman's face in a cracked mirror in Kentucky. When I told her about the tapes, her eyes lit up. You think it's demonic? I don't know, but it's not fake. She came with me the next morning. We brought crowbars, gloves, a flashlight, my field recorder, and a copy of the Glenwood tapes. I didn't plan to stay long, just long enough to see what was in that basement. Just long enough to understand why it had been sealed for 2 decades. It was colder than expected. Mid-August, and the air inside the house was 15 degrees lower than outside. Dust hung in visible clouds. The living room was untouched, mail still stacked by the door, a pair of boots kicked under a bench. It was like someone had walked out midday and never returned. But the oddest thing, every wall had mirrors. Not picture frames. Mirrors, some cracked, some foggy, all arranged to face inward. They reflected nothing clearly. Even when we stood in front of them, our shapes felt warped, elongated, off. "This isn't right," Morgan said, brushing dust off one. "Why would someone—" Then she froze. In one mirror, behind her, a third figure. Dark, tall, too far back. She spun around, nothing. We pressed on. The hallway to the basement door was narrow, papered with faded floral print that peeled like sunburnt skin. At the end was the door, thick wood stained near the knob. Not blood, more like grease or oil. A single lock held it shut, rusted through. Morgan jimmied it open with a crowbar. The hinges moaned and we were in. The stairs were steep and uneven, lined with dust and small bits of broken ceramic. Candles littered the steps, melted to stubs, their wax pooled like frozen tears. Halfway down, my recorder picked up something, a low-frequency hum, too low to hear, but felt in the teeth, in the chest. Morgan looked pale. "You feel that?" I nodded. It got worse the deeper we went. The basement opened into a circular chamber, not built like a typical cellar, but carved, like something much older had existed before the house was built. The walls were rough stone. The centre held a ring of soot burned into the floor. At the far wall, a table. Upon it, another tape recorder, still plugged into an outlet that shouldn't have worked. I pressed play. The voice was unmistakably Lars's. Day 12. I hear it at night. The thing behind the wall. It doesn't knock. It presses, like it's breathing against the bricks. Dad doesn't hear it anymore. He sleeps with earplugs now, but I see him staring at the mirrors. He talks to them when he thinks I'm not looking. I think it wants him now. Morgan shivered. Why would he keep recording? Because he knew no one would believe him otherwise. She reached into her bag and pulled out her EMF reader. It spiked instantly. Full red. Something was still down here. We didn't stay long. The recorder's battery died. My flashlight dimmed. The air grew heavier, like it was pushing us out. Before we left, I noticed one last thing. Behind the table, etched into the stone wall, were words. "It's not in the mirrors. It's in the gaps between them." We sealed the door, left the house, agreed to never return. But that night, as I reviewed the tape back in my apartment, I heard something new. After Lars's voice ended, beneath the silence, was breathing. Not mine, not Morgan's. A third voice, low, wet, like lungs filled with tar. It whispered only once, right at the end of the tape. "You brought it with you." The whisper haunted me for days. "You brought it with you." I tried to reason it away. Maybe a radio signal bled through, maybe it was a flaw in the tape itself. But no matter how I isolated the audio, no matter what filters I ran, that voice remained consistent. No warble, no distortion, deliberate, as if someone had stood inches from the mic and waited for the right moment to speak. Morgan didn't return my texts for 2 days. When she finally answered, her reply was short. "I'm not okay. I'll call you when I can." She didn't. That's when the dreams began. The first one was quiet. I stood in the basement of 12 Wren Road again, but it wasn't abandoned. The lights were on, the candles freshly lit. The soot circle in the floor was glowing faintly, and in the centre stood Lars, or at least something wearing his shape. His face was stretched too long, mouth ajar, eyes white and glassy. When he spoke, it wasn't in English, just wet clicks. And behind him in the shadows, something moved. A tall figure, no face, just skin. Then I woke up, nose bleeding. I started digging deeper. I couldn't explain the voice or the dreams or the way mirrors in my apartment suddenly felt off, like they held a split-second delay. But I could dig into the missing tape, because that's what really got me. In the original police report, it mentioned 1 tape recovered from the scene. But I had 3 from the archive box, and one of them, the last one, wasn't listed in evidence at all. No markings, no label, just static, except it wasn't. Using a waveform visualizer, I noticed faint patterns under the white noise, repeating thuds, small variations in pitch, almost like footsteps. I boosted the gain and slowed the track. It sounded like someone walking on creaky stairs. Downstairs, then silence, then scratching. Not tape distortion, physical scratching, like nails on plaster. Then, unmistakably, a voice. "This is Lars. I found where it came in. I think it's under the subfloor where Dad said the drain used to be. I heard it whispering again last night. Not my name this time. It said yours." I paused. What? The tape said mine. My name. I rewound and listened again. Same thing. But Morgan later confirmed, when she listened, it said her name. Same section, different names. That's when I knew we were in trouble. I drove to her apartment the next day, knocked 3 times before she opened the door. Her eyes were sunken. She hadn't slept. The place smelled like burnt hair. Every mirror in her home was draped in cloth. She pulled me inside. "I didn't want you to see this," she said, "but it's getting worse." She led me to her bedroom. On the wall, opposite the bed, was a hole, roughly shoulder width, carved into the drywall. The edges weren't cut with tools, they were torn, like fingers had clawed their way through. I heard it whispering again, she said. It was behind the wall, scraping. "You opened it?" "I didn't. It was open when I woke up." I leaned close. Inside the hole, the wall cavity was pitch black. No wires, no insulation, just emptiness. A void that didn't reflect the flashlight at all. Morgan whispered, something moved in there. I heard it breathe. I wanted to say it was a rat, a squirrel, a draft. But then the smell hit me. Rot, not mold, not wood, decay. We sealed it with duct tape and a board, but that night I stayed on her couch. Neither of us slept. The next day she made a decision. We needed to go back. Not for thrill, not for proof, but because we both knew something had followed us, and it wasn't going to leave on its own. We returned to 12 Wren Road with better gear. 2 audio recorders, backup batteries, EMF scanner, an old handheld camcorder I found at a pawn shop. And salt, just in case. The basement hadn't changed. Still cold, still lined with burnt candles, still wrong. But this time something was waiting. A 4th recorder, identical to the one we found last time, sat in the center of the soot circle. Powered, blinking, and when I hit play, it started with my voice. Day 20. I told her we shouldn't have come back. Something shifted the first time we left. The mirrors started looking at me before I looked into them. She's losing time now. Morgan doesn't remember carving the hole in her wall, but I've seen the video. I saw her, on her knees, hands bloodied, tearing it open while whispering to herself. I think she's hearing it full time now, not just at night. I stopped the tape. My hands were shaking. I had never recorded that. I looked at Morgan. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes locked on the recorder, and then, without warning, she whispered, "It's in the gaps." Exactly the phrase from the basement wall. She didn't remember saying it. We left immediately. On the drive home, she asked me a strange question. "Do you remember what the mirrors showed before we saw that third figure?" I paused, because I didn't. It was like the moment we saw the tall figure, everything before it. The way the room looked, the lighting, our own reflections, vanished from memory. As if that moment replaced what came before. That's when we agreed on a plan. We'd go through the footage. See what the camcorder had picked up that our eyes didn't. That night we sat in my apartment. No lights, just the screen and the tape. The footage was normal. Us entering the basement, us talking. Then we hit the part where the voice played on the recorder, but in the footage, it didn't match. Instead of my voice, it was Morgan's. Day 20. I don't sleep anymore. I hear it behind my eyes. It says your name now. We fast-forwarded. Every section of voice swapped. Her lines became mine, and mine became hers. But we had never spoken those lines aloud. It was like the tape was recording future versions of ourselves, alternative ones. Near the end, the camera turned, not by either of us, and faced the mirror. In the reflection, us. And a third person standing between, not behind, between, closer than physically possible. And then the screen flickered, just once. When it returned, we were gone. All three, just the mirror and a hand, pressing from the other side.